So we'll have a great conversation on faith and philanthropy. And we're having some interesting weather challenges. And so I'm working my way through all of this. But we're happy to have you here on tonight. And we have three gentlemen who'll be joining us in conversation tonight. And so first of all, we have Carl Sheppard, who'll be joining us. Say hello to the people.
Good evening. How you doing, everyone?
Great. And then we have Dacari Middlebrooks. If you just say hi to the audience.
Hey guys, excited to be here.
And then we have Robert Maxwell. Elder, can you get on?
I sure can. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
And so again, we're going to have a great conversation on today. We're talking about faith and philanthropy. And in this episode, we're going to discuss men, ministry, and money. So one of the ways I came up with this is really kind of talking to God about this and where are the men? So before pre-pandemic, and we're actually in church, I would look around and see the faithfulness of the women in church. But I kept seeing the dwindling of men. And I couldn't understand that. I said, what is it about our modern day church system structure that nurtures and give women a place and meaning, but it seems like the men are kind of backing up from being connected to the church. And so I thought to bring on these three gentlemen to really kind of help us explore what this looks like. Again, me being a woman, I have no idea what's in their heads, but I thought it'd be great for them to kind of talk to us from their own views and lens about what that looks like. And again, so the first question that we have is really around, naturally, some men are drawn to particular ministries. So for me, when I think of places like A.R. Bernard's church, R.A. Vernon's church, there are certain ministries, even T.D. Jakes to a certain point, they have a draw with men. And so I'd like to find out from you, what do you believe is that essential connectivity? What is that thing that kind of gets men to say, I'll give this ministry a try? So I think my question to you would be, what made you join or be connected to ministry? And then I'd like for you to also talk about what is that thing that kind of made you disconnect or feel, this wasn't the right fit for me. And so just trying to help us as ministry leaders to understand what are the things that we're doing right and what are some things that we can improve on. And so let's start with Dacari.
All right. I don't know why I knew you was going to ask me to go first. It's like the student in the classroom that never wants to raise his hand first, right? So,
Yes.
but I'll tell you, I think the main thing, and I'll keep it short, the main thing for me was a sense of belonging. One of the challenges I know, one as a millennial, especially growing up in church, there was this idea that many of us in our generation are rebels, right? And so if we can attach ourselves to ministries that embrace us fully, what I learned is that we're often asked to sit at tables where decisions are being made, but we don't give great insight or input into that conversation about what's happening in church. For me, it was I found ministries that embrace my gift, not just my presence. You wanted me to be connected, but you didn't want me to be used. And so I attach myself to ministries where my gift is fully embraced and I come as I am. You ask for me, you get me, you get the kid that I have tattoos, and at one point I had my earrings and I wore my fitted caps and I embrace hip hop. This is who you want, this is who you get, and I came free in that regard. What made me disconnect from church, though, there was a period where the same place where I discovered my gift is the same place where my gifts can be suffocated. The very place where many of us learn how to sing in a choir or be on an usher board, we learn customer service in these spaces were the same places where they shunned us, right? And if you got to be a little too popular, right, in ministry, then people didn't want to embrace you anymore. And so I disconnected when I saw that my gifts were also being, suffocated.
Awesome insight. Absolutely. So Elder Maxwell, want to add to the conversation, sir?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was a church baby, so I typically had to go where my parents took me. But once I had choice, what would draw me is something that had value, or that placed value on things I cared about as a man. And I would think first and foremost, that's even the identity of manhood, beyond just being, you know. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I think that conversation will come further down the line. But I feel like more often than not, the conversation as it relates to men, when we talk about them in church, we talk about them as if the whole of their lives is to be the provider and the protector. But we don't talk about those things that make them uniquely individual, so that they are content and satisfied, and therefore able to be effective providers and protectors, so on and so forth. So anything that will engage the holistic development of me as a man would always be a draw for me. Conversations, teaching, not just directed at the emotional, at things that would get an emotional rise, but things that would challenge my intellect, so on and so forth. So that would definitely be a draw for me. What would cause me to disconnect, of course, is when there is, we can't only talk about men from the perspective of what's not happening that's right. Okay, so as someone, so take it, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm with, I've been married for 18 years, my children, that's all we know. I don't want to consistently hear the narrative on Father's Day for all the real fathers out there, for all the real dads out there. Why do we have to qualify that? Let's just discuss the fathers it is. So there's almost an implicit undertone of angst slash, what's the word I'm looking for? There's almost an animosity and hostility woven into some of the conversations over the pulpit. And whether it comes from a man or a woman, it's still not something that's going to edify me as a man. I don't need to hear that. I'm not interested in hearing that conversation.
Interesting perspective, but I hear it. Carl?
Yes. One of the things that drew me to ministry, number one, was based upon my emotion, what I was going through at the time in my life. And that was at a very young age, I would say at 21, because growing up, I didn't like ministry. I didn't like church at all, because my mom forced us to go to church. And, the first part of our life, we was Catholic. So Catholic have church 7 days a week. And we was forced to go to church every day. And so when I got older, what drawed me to ministry is not only the emotion in what I was going through, it was also the connection. As I stated earlier when we was talking, my cousin Alvin introduced me to ministry. He said, I need you to come, just hear me play. You don't have to hear the word of God, just hear me play. And during that time of me listening, hearing them play, I was like, they sung this song. It was like 99, 99. And it really touched me. And just the music, because see, sometimes we go into ministry looking for a certain particular thing. We looking for something that we thinking that, nah, I don't want to go in there because I don't have time for the pastor to be telling me about myself or whatever it is that we are experiencing. But when the music hit, and then he introduced me to the late Michael Robinson. And when he introduced me, it was like they embraced me. So that would draw me to come back. The embrace, the connection of men and in fellowship of being together. And what I say, what can disconnect me from ministry is basically the intellect, and go back up on the emotions. I don't like I have been to maybe 4 ministries in my lifetime, and not play with the emotions or the intellect of, of us being men. And that's one thing that can, pull me away from ministry is that you're telling me, and I don't want to sound too churchy, but when you hear things and you see things, ICG in the text, and it's like, okay, where are we going with this? And sometimes you'd be like, this is not right, this is not fit. And so that's when that can pull me away from ministry.
Okay, thank you for that. Just thinking about, men and connectivity, and I've seen and I've watched some ministries online, and so, the social media world has allowed us to see posts from various ministries, and so if I'm watching Reginald Sharp or Brandon Wu-Tang, presiding Bishop Walker, I'm always paying attention to the audience, how they interact, the messages that they're bringing, and I feel like in terms of empowering people, if it's men, women, it should be a big part of that. And so a part of empowering people within the local church, especially in the men's section, we have men's ministry. So we have women's ministry, men's ministry, to meet the distinct needs that we have, to be able to answer the questions that we couldn't do. One of the things I know for us at Changing the Generation, pre-COVID, Bishop and Pastor D would also do a Bible study where we would have men in one section of the church and women in another, to allow us space to have conversations we may not feel as comfortable having together. And then allow Bishop to say some things to the men that we raise our hands to, and the same thing with Pastor D, that we would have conversations and then come together as a unit. And I always did love that. And so in terms of men's ministry, just have a question as a woman, because I always hear with men's ministry, and I'm like, men, they get up there and it's like, men, we take our rightful place, and I'm like, okay. So, and I hear it all the time. That's the thing for men's ministry. Every men's ministry that I've seen is like, men need to take their rightful place. So in terms of this concept of a rightful place for men, my question is, if men have to take it, for one, why? Why do they have to take it? If you got to take your place? And then also for me is, what is this concept of rightful place? And did men get displaced? And at what point do you think in churchdom did that happen? And I'll let anybody jump in on that one.
Okay, I will.
I heard Maxwell.
This is Maxwell. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Just your volume seems a little low, but we can hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can. I'll speak up as much as I can. So here is, for me, I don't know when we say rightful place, and I think that just could depend on your theological leanings and underpinnings and so on and so forth. But I think sometimes for me, when I hear rightful place, I think a place, just a place, period. Mm-hmm. Truthfully, in my opinion, more often than not, programs, services, very often sometimes messages are geared toward women. And even, I mean, because it's the, so let's just give a generic example. For example, if they're talking about, a relationship and demanding the best from a relationship, it is always from the perspective, because girl, if he's not doing such and such, then you need to do X, Y, Z. And it almost, and we never balance that with instructions for men on how to navigate relationships effectively. The man is typically the bad guy in the relationship example that is often given across the pulpit. And I've noticed that, and I get that very often. Sometimes that's pulling your audience in, because your audience is majority women, so you're going to speak to those whom you can relate to. But if you want to engage men, then you're going to have to engage them too as well, and find out what they're struggling with and how they're navigating various issues. Very often, sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. So just because people, just because there are more women talking about the issues that they're having, and men may not be as verbally communicative about that, doesn't mean they're not navigating various issues relationally, spiritually, so on and so forth. So I think part of that, when we talk about time for men to take their rightful place, I think sometimes it's just finding a place in ministry, finding their place, finding their voice, finding their spot. They're already there. They're already represented in lower numbers in church as is. So then very often the program, even if you look at one of the challenges I know at that at one time with the singles ministry, even at Changing the Generation, when they would have various events, is that it was majority women there. So if there are 200 women at a given event and 2 men show up, it's kind of an imbalance. And like it or not, men draw other men. So you want to know, okay, I don't want to be outnumbered. I'm hoping there's some other guys there that I can relate to. So I think it's part of finding a place. And then I think just educating men to be their best selves. I don't know that it's over or taking anything from a woman or anything to that degree. I think it's simply finding a place and maximizing that identity. And truthfully, we don't have very many programs that lead to that end.
Interesting view. I actually agree with that. Carl, Dacari, who wants to go next on that one?
Well, well, that's a good one. Taking our rightful place. I used to always question that. What does that actually mean, taking our rightful place? And I look at, I kind of referred it to, what are they talking about? Are they talking about are they talking about Jesus? Because most I would say pastors used to saying that, talking about Adam and Eve, Eve lay there and persuade the man to eat the forbidden fruit. That's what they're calling. And it's like, we let the women take control and take over, and we have to get back into our rightfully places. So that's where I look at it like that. Once I started to get the understanding of what it really meant to me personally. And one of the things, if I must say, I love my pastor, Bishop Morton, with all my heart. One of the things that was happening here, and if I can be transparent and honest with it, and when you ask that question, I'm like saying, what it is, why is my wife, she married to me, why is she constantly running to the church all the time? And every time she come home, she's telling me what Bishop Morton has preached. And so after a while, I started really to engage in ministry and try to figure out what it is that Bishop is doing to get my wife's attention. And then all of a sudden, it just hit me. The Spirit told me that the same thing that I can do for Bishop Morton, I can do it for you. And so all of a sudden, I just started watching him and observing him and studying him. And I just started going into the scriptures, and not only going into the scriptures, but also reading other books. And I'm like saying to myself, okay. And then I started telling you, like, babe, Bishop Morton is going to preach this, and Bishop Morton is going to talk about this tomorrow. And actually constantly praying and hearing from God myself, because at first I wasn't hearing from God. And that's one thing that I love, that Bishop always taught about, spirit over the mind. And I used to always think with my mind. And then all of a sudden I felt, in my personal experience, I got in my rightful place by actually getting into the spirit, kneeling down on my face before God and asking him. And then all of a sudden I started to see things change. you will come home and you'll say, man, how you knew that? And I'm like, okay, it really works. So it really works, me praying to God and reading the word. And I'm telling you stuff to encourage you even before you go to church and hear what our pastor was saying. So it was like, this what it meant, because I took offense when it was saying get in your rightful place. But I said to myself, this what it really means when they say, men, get into your rightful place. And is that not only, not only in ministry and praising God, but also in your household, being an example, being a leader into your house.
All right, sir. Dacari?
Yeah, I think I would, probably mimic both of these guys. Mr. Sheppard, my guy, he was always look out for me. Maxwell. This is our second call we've had together, probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Second
But
one.
I know. But no, I would say, I've always had a problem with the language myself. I've always tried to wrestle and work through theological tension, and that's for growth for me. But I think that I feel like all of it was probably in good intentions, right? When they say get in your rightful place, they're really just calling out something that, and a lot of times there's language that they heard used before. I don't think a lot of them really say, hey, I'm gonna come up to the pulpit. It's something else that they heard someone else say. But I think, again, I think our rightful place is really coming to an awareness of who you are. And I think that that's the most important and most sacred thing I think we can honestly give to God, if we're to be great men in general. So I think that, for me, coming into your rightful place is all about establishing who you are. And I've always said this anytime I've spoken, the most harmful thing a person can do to their soul is being faithful to the wrong assignment, being faithful to a thing you were never called to do, being faithful in relationships you were never called to be in, just being faithful to the wrong thing. And I think once you recognize who you are and what God has called you to, then that is your rightful place.
Awesome sentiment. And again, great conversations and observations. Pastor Kennard Weaver is online and he made a statement. He said the church must begin speaking constructively to men and not destructively about men. And so the uplifting of men, they're, where you are, where you should be. And again, being an African-American female, I get this. There's a war, Black Lives Matter, all these things. We see that there is a war on Black men. And as a woman of God, as a wife, I understand that my husband goes to war every day he goes out that door. And when he comes back in the door, my husband doesn't need another war. And so I would say the same thing to the church, is that there's a war going on within our families, Black families, and our families. And that when we come to church, we don't need another war. So how do we turn from a place of, as Maxwell, I think, said, of saying and balancing how we present messages to allow men to be able to be uplifted as well as women, but get into a place where we can all come in agreement and feel that we're both empowered to do what God has called us to do. I love, Dacari, what you said about our rightful place. It's not so much even, because I think when I hear it as a female, I'll say this, when I hear it, I was like, patriarchy. That's me. I'm just honest. Male dominance. That's what I hear as a female. Instead of me hearing men should have a place. All voices should be heard. A man's voice should be heard. And so as women, and I know this is from the 70s and the whole female empowerment, and I love it. I love being a woman, to be able to make my own decisions and open my own bank accounts, those things that women couldn't do historically. But I also understand, I embrace my husband's leadership. I actually embrace the leading that my husband has. I may not always agree with everything, But I would say honestly, with Carl, 95% of the chance he's actually right. It was funny. We were on our way coming from New Orleans, and we were driving, and he knows who I am. And it's like the GPS is telling us to get on, we're coming off of 85. And I said, GPS telling us to keep going on 85 and hit 20. And he was like, no, the spirit said, let's just get on 285. And I was like, okay. And in the end, he was right. There was 2 car accidents, but in the end, we actually still got home quicker than we did. And so I've learned over the years to not discount my husband's voice in this. And especially as he's grown in his faith and as he hears God, I really believe in God. When Carl says, the Spirit said, God said, I hear Carl's voice and I value Carl's voice and I yield to what God is saying to my husband. And that doesn't always work all the times, because then you have to kind of separate, I believe, the role of a man in a household from that of a man's role within the church structure. Because sometimes I think that it muddles a little bit. And then a man having a rightful place doesn't always mean that the men has to always lead in every situation. Because there's some denominations where, the female voice can't be heard or we're muted. And I believe that, scripture says that your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. I believe that. And I think there's space for both sons and daughters to be able to do that and have voice. And so I think in terms of unique spaces, just practically thinking in terms of men's ministry, or just overall activities for men. So let me not just box us into this whole men's ministry concept. In terms of practical activities, what type of things do you think would help us to build men, to draw men, to help ministers to be able to do that? Especially there's some female pastors who are on this line and those who listen to the broadcast. Even in that standpoint, how do we help them to begin to build things to empower men? Because the truth is, some men, they haven't grown to a place where they can be under a female's leadership. It's just honest. But there are some who are. And so how do we make sure that we embrace it both, from a pastoral role and as a ministry role to be more supportive and encouraging to men? Maxwell, you want to go for that one?
Yeah, I can. And please let me know if you can't hear me. I think, and if you will allow me, I'm gonna answer that question first, and then I want to circle back and grab something from our previous discussion.
Sure.
But I think the type of things that men are looking for, and again, I don't want to do a bunch of sweeping generalizations because men run the gamut. There are some, like, you can't just have a video game party or a sports party or sports watch party and think you want to pull all men from. That's just, we are as varied as we as Black people are. Like all Black people don't eat watermelon and chitlins. It's that kind of thing. So I think you have to find the different things that hold your demographic of men, what they're interested in, and find that thing. If it's cause-driven ideas, if it's things that are beyond the church. I kind of like the Home Depot model of ministry, and I've read about that, where it's not so much relegating everything to inside the four walls of the church, but hey, I feel called to work in street ministry. So then as a church, how can you come alongside this particular man and help him to do it? So encourage him, you can do it and we can help you do it. So let me show you how you can do that. We will offer you the covering of our church, but we'll help you to walk out your calling in those specific areas that you feel called to. I think it's equipping them with information. I think it's equipping them with resources. I think it's recognizing that men, there are those who are at various stages in their careers and they may be trying to get to another level. So let's have workshops for men specifically as it relates to skill sets, developing skill sets, and teaching them to be competent in that area. Again, that's those constructive things, because I feel like sometimes we have these moments where we say, that brother needs to get a job and that brother needs to such and such. But the conversation never happened. But that brother has probably been looking for a job for the last year and a half, and there are some things that are blocking and impeding him from being successful. So how about we come alongside that brother and help him gain the necessary skills to become gainfully employed? So I think those are the types of activities men would like to see, activities that make them effective in their speaking constructively to men. What I want, what I hope we get out of this discussion is the upliftment and construction of men does not have to simultaneously mean the belittling against women. You don't have to burn one to the ground in order to elevate the other. We can all be constructive. We can actually exist in an environment where everybody's uplifted and everybody is ministered to. And I think we have to look at them both ends. So let's build up women, let's build up men. We can do both. And so I think if we look at that and not look at men, telling men to take their rightful place should be more like an empowerment as opposed to viewed as, oh, they're trying to come and, this is something that's not going to be pro-woman. No, I think if we present that information correctly and we communicate that effectively, every woman, every mother, every daughter, every sister, niece, however, wants their man to be in their quote unquote rightful place. And that rightful place is manifesting everything that God designed them to have and to be. I think that's what that conversation is, and that's what that looks like.
Awesome. Carl, what do you think practically churches can do?
Well, basically, one thing is I agree with Pastor Maxwell. What churches can do is also be encouragement. I agree with that Home Depot model. Be an encouragement, build up on the man's strength. Also help him in his weakness. One of the things that I loved about changing the generation is that the men actually embrace when they see you there, you're serving, they actually embrace you and help you to get to the place that you was trying to get. And sometimes we may not come to go eat. We may not go shoot pool or go bowling together, but it was just that overall conversation and checking up on you, showing concern, showing the love and the compassion about what you're going through, no matter if it's your strengths of getting you to the place you need to be or your weakness. Like even with Pastor Maxwell, I share, not share, but I watched him from afar. And I always, when I listen to him teach and preach, I never seen a Bishop Noel Jones up close. And when I heard him speak, that's what I seen. And I'm like saying, there are actually other people can speak like Bishop Noel Jones. And so I say I gravitated to it. And what he did was he embraced it. He embraced it. And I would, like I said, he didn't sit there and say, look, do this, do that, do that. It's just that he wasn't jealous or anything. He embraced it. Embraced the thing, man, I enjoy your teaching. I love your preaching, and also with Pastor Thomas, it's like he embraced it. And a lot of people don't know the story of Pastor Thomas. I told Pastor Thomas my story about preaching. God has called me to preach. And Pastor Thomas just basically told me, that's all. And basically I had a fear of preaching God's word, because when I started reading the the relationships, not the relationship, when I started reading the history of the family, the family, and I'm like saying, what is all these words? And what is all these different names in the Bible?
All the begotten, like, we get you. We don't like those either.
Yeah, and I'm like saying, what is this that God is doing? I'm like, I'm trying to learn the Bible, read the Bible, study the Bible. I'm already having a problem with English there is. And here I'm reading the King James book. And then all of a sudden, Pastor Tom was like, man, that's all you having trouble with? That's all your struggles? So he embraced my weakness at the time. but then also he used my strength. But there are so many, I don't want to call names because I'd be on here for so long, even with brother Dacari. When I first met him, that was probably about 6-7 years ago. And I asked you, I said, man, that's a young brother. And he was teaching the class, on technology. And I said, how old is he? And you told me his age. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, if brother Dacari could do that, I can actually be computer savage and learn the things that he's teaching. And it's like, they embrace. And then the next year when we got met up, it's like he embraced me and he gave me that sense of hope, that sense of joy. He appreciated because at the time I was setting up the projectors, and he embraced that. And it was like, man, I love going to the setup. I started making sure I get there early because he showed the appreciation and he embraced the things, the strengths that I was capable of doing at that time. So that's some of the things that I believe that ministry have to do. Ministry have to do is embrace the man's strength, and also most importantly, embrace their weakness.
Thank you for that. Dacari?
Yes, I like both of those, encouragement, but also some practical things. I like that Maxwell talked about a lot of us don't have shared interests, right? So sometimes you can group us in and it just don't make sense. So I think some practical things. One, I think we have to think about what are some of the things that you like doing. And I know this sounds weird, but we don't talk a lot about this. There are some outside things that you do when you're with your family that maybe a group of men could do. Men play dominoes, you know, like me and my brothers, we get on our bikes and we ride. Why not have a situation where, hey, this is a group that meet up every Tuesday and they ride through neighborhoods, and afterwards they go for dinner. This is their hangout spot. There are things that you can do. If it's a bike club, if it's, a card party. I know growing up, they say, well, don't play cards, etc. I get all of that, but I'm like, man, it's, to me, ain't nothing wrong with a little spades,
There's nothing wrong with spades.
I mean, even if it's Uno, I mean, there's so many different games out there. Phase 10, there's so many different things that you could do. And again, I think it's all about making sure you connect to the things that are of interest to you. That's the most important thing. And when you do that, I think it's a win-win for all parties. But don't put me in a situation where you want me to come to the church and watch the Super Bowl. I'm not watching the Super Bowl in your sanctuary. I'm sorry, I'm just not doing it. I'm not going. You know what I mean? Like I'm just not doing that. Like I don't want to go to another prayer breakfast. I've been to all of them. I don't want to go to the nearest Piccadilly. Like y'all can keep that. I don't even eat that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's another thing when you think about food. There are things that we can connect on. Now we got a lot of people that are switching to becoming vegans. So there's so many things that you can do. Maybe there's a cooking class. Like me and we have so much, we feminized this idea of cooking, but now it's like, man, if you can cook, it's a group of brothers. We at the end of the day, I guess my point is I want to be connected to people I can do life with. That's it. Who can I do life with? And in that, there's encouragement,
That's awesome. And so
That's
again,
good.
I hear that in terms of connectivity and understanding that men, like everyone else, there's no monolith. And so there's no one male thing, definitely the Super Bowl is what a lot of churches do. But I also heard Maxwell, talk about, what do we do with men who actually like orchestra and opera music? What do we do with men who like, musical theater? How do we help to draw men, again, with different interests? And it doesn't always have to be, basketball, football, those kind of things. But I love that the variation with cooking and some other things. The one thing I know for me, that I look to men is almost like how we have the tightest woman and teaching, the women. And I feel like there could also be space for men to do some of that. And so almost like we have the model of the big brothers, big sisters, and where we have men who mentor other young boys. Because unfortunately, in our age and time, there's a lot of single women households. And so how, even with that, do we allow space for mentorship? And if it doesn't have to be like a one-on-one, it could be where we bring in all of the men to come in and do certain things. One of my, call him my seminary brother, Brother Chapman, OC, he has something that he's doing in Alabama right now that I love. And it's really around empowering young Black boys and helping them in all those areas. And so I was online and saw on social media that he was teaching them how to iron. You know, it's simple stuff. How do you put on a tie? It's the basics that sometimes we lose in that. And so even finding space for that, for men to give back. And it doesn't have to be in the way of just, you know, again, men come in and lift up the heavy bench, even though you can do that. It doesn't have to be men come and paint the church. But what are some other ways that men can be of service? And I think that's a very practical way for us to look at that. In terms of the next question, I'm sorry, I'm getting in here. And that's leading right back where I am. In terms of philanthropy and giving. And so again, in this space, we know that philanthropy is time, talent, treasure. And then we added another one, which was testimony. So time, talent, treasure, and testimony. So how do we engage men in those areas? And then the other thing I think I want to talk about is what's on the minds of men, and how does some of the church activities stretch you beyond where you want to go? And so I think as a woman, I know what my role is, the things I do in my household. And I was talking to my husband a little bit about this and said, when, you know, the pastor gets up and says, sow a seed. Honestly, I don't think that much about it. I sow, the spirit lead, I sow funds. I've grown in that area. But also, I don't have to think like my husband. My husband is the head of our household. And so Carl has to worry about, is the mortgage paid? Is the rent paid? You know, well, there's our mortgage paid. Is the car notes paid? Insurance up to date? Those kind of things, lawn cut. And I think about that in terms of men and your time and your talent. And so even, you know, thinking about activities, if, you know, some men, again, I'm gonna generalize, this is not everybody doesn't like cutting their lawn. Some people hire folk to do that. But if men like to cut their lawn on a Saturday or like to wash their cars on a Saturday morning, and so that may not be the best time to have a activity for men. And so talk to me a little bit about that, just in terms of giving, you know, time, talent, treasure, any one of those areas, or testimony. How can we help to engage men more in that? And Dacari, I'm actually going to start back with you again.
Was Maxwell trying to talk?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was hoping I can get a second to hear y'all great thoughts. I was thinking. Give me a second. Let me think a little deeply on this, because it's a loaded question.
Okay. Well, we'll let Maxwell go if Maxwell ready to jump in.
Okay, I can. So I will start with, when it comes to giving, whether it's time, talent, all of those things. I don't like to generalize, but I'm just going to I'm going to do my best not to. But it has to make sense. You're not going to, I'll speak to me. I'm a spirit-led believer, all of that. When it comes to giving, first and foremost, I've already purposed in my heart what I'm going to give. So if there's a deviation, I come to church prepared. Honestly, I've come to church, probably have all by the time I get there, I've already given. Now, if there is something spontaneous and the speech, of course, we're going to move. I'm not going to be moved by an emotional appeal. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. It's going to have to, and if there's something spontaneous, it would still have to make sense. I want to look at the bigger picture. I want to see that what I'm giving to isn't something that a year from now is sunk, or, you know, we can't give an accurate accounting of where funds have been spent. I want to see results. I want to invest in something that's really going to make a difference. Be it programs, if I'm investing my time and or talent and certainly my resources, I want it to make sense. When I say make sense, I'm not just talking about intellectually. I mean, the vision I don't want the vision to be dreaming. I want it to be something that is solid that I've invested
Yes.
in. So it can't just be some, if you're vision casting, if you're dreaming in the dreaming phase, I talk with you all day, it's cool. But once you start asking for those resources, I want to see a timetable. What does this look like? What is the expected return on investment? Because I've invested my time, I've invested my talent, I've invested my money. So it has to make sense. And you can't, because I'm spirit led and I'm thoroughly studied in the word, you're not gonna fluff me into, you're not gonna manipulate me into that. It's gonna have to be something solid. So you got to put your big boy boots on when you come at when you're ready for that. And so I think a lot of men think in terms of what's the end result. It's got to matter. I got to be able to look back and see some accomplishment. Like I run specifically.
Yeah.
I'm a runner. I run so that I can look at the medals on my wall and see where I've gone. I have a goal in mind and something. It has to make sense. And I hope I'm making sense with that, but it has to make sense. So certain things that, what would it take? It would take very methodical programs. It would take transparency. It would take transparency. Can I say that again? Transparency. It would take transparency as it relates to what the end result is expected to be in order for me to invest my time, talent, and resources. I could go on all day about that, so I'm going to stop. Go ahead, y'all.
Well, in terms of philanthropy, I absolutely agree with that. There are two things. I said there's a lot of money to be given, both in the private and public sectors. But the thing that in terms of churchdom is churchdom, in order to be able to get that in a nonprofit world, you have to have both transparency and accountability. And most churches want the money, but they don't want the transparency or the accountability. And so when they're ready to step up to that game, I guarantee you the money will come. They won't have to beg. They won't have to do, a 20-hour offering. The people will see the evidence, the return of investment, and the people will give. But it comes with, again, transparency and accountability.
With the men.
Especially with the men.
With the men, Elder. Yeah, Elder. I think the same way, just how you just laid that out with the money is available, available with to be given, the grants and things like that. When the accountability and the transparency comes, I believe, just as you said, the men are ready to invest in that type of stuff, but it takes that transparency and accountability.
Yes.
Awesome. Carl?
And that is actually true. You have to be transparent when it comes to even with our time, because I don't need you to waste my time. And because there's so much that we have to do at home. And, you spoke earlier that we have to take care of our home. I read one time, I hear a lot, let's just say that, a lot of times that you take care of God's house, God will take care of your house. And I was in that phase at one time that I was taking care of God's house so much that my grass was up to my knees, carpet, usually I do my own carpet being messed up. And so then all of a sudden, carpet being dirty, and all of a sudden I'm like saying, okay, there's something wrong with this picture. So I begin to say, let's go back to the basic. The basic is spending time at home first, because sometimes I've been a part of 4 ministries. Some ministries just waste your time. And I'm like, you could have called me on the phone and told me that, but I love it at the same time. But it's like, don't waste my time, and then use my talent, use my gift. Don't put me in a position that I'm not comfortable with. Don't put me in a position that I don't know nothing about. My biggest strength is serving. I have professional cleaning service. So I can lay there and buff a floor and shine a floor like nothing. But, don't put me in the position saying you're going to be the host of this particular program when I'm not a host. But we see how you talk and you communicate. Not only being transparent with the church you have to be also transparent. And when we talk about money, that's a whole different ball game when we talk about money. I love to give money and sow seed into ministry, but what'll make me stop also, let's go back to being transparent and telling us, when we talk about philanthropy, most of the times when a donor give you money, let's say someone millionaire gives you money, they're holding you accountable, and you have to actually explain in details, or they'll tell you what they want you to spend that $100 million on, $10 million on. And, and it's the same. You don't have to be specifically explaining it to us, but you have to show us that, okay, why am I coming here every Sunday and the light bulb is still blowed out in the same area? Where's my money is going to? Because if it's God's house, it's our house. Why is when I sit down in the pew is rocking and there's only 4 people that's sitting in this pew? So it's like, where is the money going? We have to be transparent. We have to be held accountable, not only for ministry, because like I always told you, when we'll go visit churches, anything, I always told you, Nita, I'm not giving my money to no sinking ship. I work too hard to give my money to a ship that's sinking. Now I can throw out a life vest to help a hand and encourage them how to get out of a situation. But when it comes to money, it's like I work too hard to just give it away. And, and even, I have one of my daughters, I noticed and I seen that she's on. And even when it comes to the home, when it comes to money and not just ministry, what we do is when we give, we don't have a problem with giving, but we have a problem with you not showing that you being responsible with what we give.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even though you're throwing out big numbers, saying $100 million or $10 million, the truth is every time somebody gives within ministry, it's an investment. And the truth is we have to realize that may be that person's last $5, but they gave it in faith because they heard something in faith. And in philanthropy, we always said that people give on a promise. And so when a leader or pastor gets up and they talk about philanthropy and giving, then yes, it's based upon a promise. And so people give in good faith and they're looking for you to deliver on that promise. And at some point, people get tired of giving to broken promises. It's like you didn't ask so many times and we're still waiting to see the results on that. And the other part, I agree with you on this, don't waste my time. And so all of our time has, we all have life, and time is something that is always at balance, especially in this pandemic age where we see loved ones who struggle. We've seen, people within our homes and our families who may have transitioned due to COVID, even within ourselves, our own struggles or whatever long-term illnesses or challenges we may be going through. And so in terms of our time, make sure that, those basic things that we all know in meetings, have an agenda, have an objective. What are we actually meeting about? What are the outcomes at the end of this meeting? What do you want to get out of this? And so we're not just spinning wheels. And again, like you're saying, wasting time, because I could be cutting grass. I could be, as you're saying, Carl, I could be sweeping my floors. I could be washing clothes. I could be spending time with my family. And so if you're going to take time and ask me to give up some time, make sure that it's meaningful. Dacari, and I'm looking at the lightning behind you too. So
Yeah, I know. Look, I just saw it. I was like, okay. I'm mad. So mad my power went out at home. But what I was gonna say is, and I keep it quick because I don't want to belabor the time. I genuinely believe I think what I probably would have said in the beginning is something a blend of two, but I do believe this, that men invest in what they believe in, right? And not just men, people in general. Wherever they see a connection, they dive into it. And the truth is, I love the idea of transparency. We want to know where our money's going. We want to know that whatever you're doing is reaching people, is connecting to a mission larger than yourself. I genuinely believe that the art of life is giving. Like that is our core mission, the core value of even who I am is to give. I tease my fiance and even my mom. I said, God hadn't blessed me in the way I wanted to financially, because I probably give it all away, because I just love helping people, love being just a beacon of light to so many people, because I didn't have as much as I wanted to growing up. But I'll say this: I think when the vision is clear, when the mission is central to the hearts of people, you will have a thriving ministry. But when the ministry and the vision is inconsistent, you will always have a ministry that's barren, producing little to nothing.
mm,
So I want to see the fruit.
I want to see the fruit.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm looking at time is passing. And the one thing I would like to ask each of you to do is just give a word of encouragement to men. I think that's how I like to end this. Give a word of encouragement. Now, however you want to frame that, if it's about just being a man and encouraging them, if it's about ministry, is about money. What can you help to encourage a man on tonight who may be listening?
I, I guess I'll start and I'll be quick. Uh, I'll say this: give yourself permission to live. I think that there's so many factors and barriers that are set up for us in life, where we're kind of in a season sometimes where it's like, I don't know if I can make it. But give yourself permission to live. Give yourself permission to grieve things. Give yourself permission, even if you're in a broken state, to live in that moment and then go get help. Give yourself permission to be. Um, we're so um, called to be so strong. And I'll tell you, I went through such a broken period in my life, and I didn't think I had permission to be broken. I didn't think I had permission to say, hey, I need help. I think being transparent about where you are on your journey will lead you to a place of restoration. And I tell you, I'm a living witness. I'm a walking manifestation of God's grace, because I know where I've been, and the future is still bright. And so I say to men out there, embrace yourself, love yourself, be true to yourself, and always be honest.
Amen. I enjoyed it. That was great, sir. My encouragement to men is also is to love yourself, be true to yourself, be honest to yourself. With these three things here, not only that you will grow mentally, you will grow physically, you will also grow spiritually. So with that being said, that don't give up, as Brother Dacari said, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on the church. Don't give up on ministry. Don't give up on love. Don't give up on the things that God has promised you. Because if God promised you, you know that it's a declaration or assurance that he will do that thing that he has told you he's going to do for you. So don't give up. I am a living testimony. The things that God has showed me and has told me at a very young age, even in my early 20s, I'm seeing these things come to pass. It may take long, but guess what? Don't give up on yourself, and just be encouraged. Find positive men that you can hang with, that you can talk to, and that will embrace you in where you are in your situation.
Awesome. Maxwell?
Sure. I would say, men, recognize that you are necessary. You are absolutely necessary. In a culture that seems to at times minimize the necessity of men, recognize that you are necessary in the lives of your family. You are necessary in the lives of the world. We are necessary. So in that regard, your perspective is necessary. I think men have a unique perspective. And I think for as wonderful as the female perspective is and equally necessary, I believe so is the man's perspective. And I think those complementary perspectives oftentimes are what's the missing ingredient for progression and success. Our presence is necessary. Presence in our homes, presence in our churches, in our communities, even in our educational institutions. Our presence is necessary. Our physical health, because our presence is necessary, prioritize your physical health. Our wives should not have to drag us to the doctor's office and make us prioritize our physical health. You want to be around to see your kids and your children's children. So prioritize your physical health. And again, can't underscore it enough, your voice is necessary. And to your children, speak well into your children, speak well of your children to your children. That affirmation can be life-changing.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Dacari Middlebrooks, Carl Sheppard, and Robert Maxwell for joining us here tonight. Again, we look forward to seeing you next month, and we'll have another interesting topic that we'll discuss in the areas of faith and philanthropy. Again, thank you. I've been your host, Juanita Sheppard. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.